Hey everybody, welcome to episode 62 of the Go Get Outside podcast. This is your host, Jason Milligan. Welcome back, welcome aboard. It is that time again. It is time for another Roundtable episode. On today's show, we will be talking with 4 separate individuals about bike packing and bike touring. And if you are not familiar with those terms, you will be later in the show. But suffice it to say, this episode is all about traveling long distances for multiple days on a bicycle. I want to thank Lauren Grabowski, who appeared back in episode 40, for helping me put this together. She got this group of individuals together so that we could have this discussion. We will hopefully answer all of your questions about on and off-road bike packing and touring. So let us go talk to our 4 guests about living off of a bicycle.
I am Nate Carballo. I ride bikes when I am not working. Sometimes I camp multiple days while doing so.
I'm Nils Hilliard. I'm a LA native, and I also ride bikes when I can, as often as I can, and also go camping on them when I can.
My name's Lauren Grabowski. I love getting outside and doing all kinds of things, but biking's probably the thing that I do the most.
Hi, I'm Megan Graham. I also like to ride my bike, just like everyone here. I ride with these fools a lot and camp with them and do all the outdoor things.
I think it'd be great if you were the only one who said, I don't like to ride a bike. I'm not sure why I'm here.
I've never ridden a bike before, actually.
We're gonna get you a bike with some training wheels immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I ride a tricycle, actually.
Oh, nice. So now that everyone knows who you all are and they've heard your credentials, which is you like to ride bikes, so therefore you're an expert on the topic, we can have you all explain to those people who have no idea what it is, what bike packing is, and how that may differ from touring.
I'm going to take a shot at this answer. There's some people differentiate bike touring from when you're primarily on roads and have panniers to carry your stuff. And bike packing is when you have more of like an ultralight setup, often without racks or rear panniers, usually on dirt. Not everyone makes this distinguishment between the two, and the type of bike touring I like to do often kind of combines both.
And I think a quick thing we could say for everybody is bike packing is what it sounds like. It's kind of backpacking, except with a bike. Mm-hmm. You said a lot of people that are road biking have panniers. So explain to people what those are.
It's a bag that you put on your bike to carry your stuff, and there's all different styles, but it usually hangs on like a rack on the front or the rear of your bike. So yeah, and usually you have it like sort of symmetrical for optimal balance. It'll be like 2 large ones on the back and 2 smaller ones on the front. It's like a French word. Some people say pannier. I call it a pannier.
So who wants to tell Lauren why she's wrong and why bike packing is something totally different than what she just said?
Ooh, this is a debate podcast. I, before the beginning of this podcast, did not know that there was a difference. I don't know. I've always started with panniers on racks. The things that used to go on bike frames weren't fitting towards certain frames in the beginning. I guess, yeah, backpacking or bike packing is like a lighter weight version of it, and you can go further in a day and up bigger hills and stuff like that.
So everybody's in agreement now on the term? Lauren insinuated there was going to be a lot more debate about what this means.
No, I feel very educated now, actually. I didn't know. I thought, yeah, bikepacking, bike touring. I started saying bikepacking once I met backpackers.
Listeners at home looking for a debate can go on Reddit and go read like what some really esoteric folks feel about this topic.
Oh, so are you insinuating there's some Redditors right now listening to this saying, no, these idiots don't know what the fuck they're talking about?
Just taco.
Quick thing we talk about right here is most people listening to this probably rode a bike at some point in their life, but they probably don't bike pack, or maybe some people do. So how did each of you go from being a person with a tricycle or a bike with training wheels to a person who decided, let me put a bunch of my valuables onto a bike and go long distances?
I guess I got into sports a little bit late. I never really did much sportsing. I grew up in Florida, and it's too hot out, and I was a goth kid, and so I just stayed inside a lot and didn't understand why my sister was outside in the pool, like tanning and stuff. And so I stayed indoors is the point of that. Yeah, once I started deciding, like, hey, I live in Southern California. It's nice outside. I should go do stuff. I started with hiking because you can just walk, and that's pretty simple. You don't have to have a lot of skills. Started biking more around town. The two things kind of ran tangentially, where I was getting more into hiking and then into the backcountry and the backpacking and multi-day backpacking trips, taking wilderness travel course with the Sierra Club, and then getting more and more into cycling during the week, night rides with She-Wolf Attack Team was a local group, women's group that had a lot of night rides.
SWAT.
Yeah, shout out to SWAT and Susie Lowbrow. Yeah, so through that I got strong enough to feel like I could give it a shot. I knew some people who had started doing it. I had a boyfriend once a long time ago. One time I had a boyfriend, I swear. No, this guy I was dating rode from Portland to LA, and I was just like, wow, that's the coolest thing ever. I'd never heard of anyone doing that. I met him out on his tour and like hung out for a weekend and was just like, what? This is so cool. So I was really happy when I started meeting people that like do both. Backpacking gets real boring because walking is only so entertaining, but bikepacking, there's such like a varied amount of things you could be seeing in a day. Like you're going to be in town, you're going to be in the woods, you're going to be at the top of a mountain, you're going to be by some water. You can really get a lot further and have a lot more freedom and variety. So yeah, I think I'm pretty sold on bikepacking being the best thing ever. Yeah.
I would say I'm also pretty sold on it being the best thing ever. I think what attracted me to bikes in the first place was exploring our environment here within the city. And the more I felt confident on the bike, just to try and explore further and see as far as I could go. I wasn't driving a car at the time. The bike was a way to get further afield, and then putting stuff on to sleep overnight was just the way to go, like that one step further.
I used to ride when I was a little kid, and I rode BMX, and then I quit doing that, and then I went to college, and parking sucked, and so I bought a bike on Craigslist, and I started riding around town in Long Beach. When you're in college, you have a lot of free time, and I would just ride to different bars that I would look up on Google Maps. The further I would try to make the miles as as far as I could, until I was like riding to Dana Point or like Laguna Beach to go drink and then ride back home and then drink a cup of coffee and go to class. And I moved to LA and I found out the bikes can have braze-ons and you can like carry stuff with you. So I bought a rack and I used to visit my friends in Long Beach and stay the night. Friends moved away from Long Beach, but I still had these panniers, so I used to just like explore Long Beach and camp in little spots that weren't not campsites or anything, but just, spend the night in Long Beach and drink and hang out and then ride back home the next morning. And then I started riding bikes in LA more often on night rides and stuff, and met a group called EPBP, Echo Park Bike Posse. Met more people that rode bikes in the fashion that I did. Started going on longer rides and then multi-day rides, and then I got more into, instead of just driving to Joshua Tree or driving to Sequoias and camping for a couple of days in your car, just exploring a smaller amount of area, more detailed, I guess, on a bike. I guess I would say that I'm like I'm a bike tourist instead of a bike packer.
I like that you look to Lauren to give you validation for whatever you say.
Learned. No, I mean, yeah.
I'm a human being? Yes, okay.
Well, she'll be quick to correct if anyone does misstate.
I feel like bike touring for me in the beginning was about carrying as many things as you can, always having room for like trinkets and whatever, a 6-pack of beer or a statue that you find at a garage sale in Petaluma. It was a slower pace for me, but I've gotten more into bike packing, and I have a frame bag that actually Nils made me that I've backpacked once with. It was very hard. You bring a lot less stuff. I didn't have my chair.
Did you still have your statue from Petaluma?
No room for cargo. Some people helped me carry my trash home.
I think it's a really interesting question because
you probably already answered it on your own episode of this
Exactly. Maybe. So well, it's also interesting to think of other people's answers, because there's so many people in LA that I started biking with just around town to grab a beer. And we've all sort of evolved together to become better cyclists and to do more bike packing together. And we've shared a lot of tips on gear and route planning. And so I think just having other people has made the world of difference for me. I had always wanted to bike tour growing up. I just didn't feel like I had the opportunity or the knowledge. And in fact, as I did mention on a previous podcast, my first bike tour, I didn't have a bike. I showed up at Glacier and was like, oh, the road's closed to cars. I think I'll bike it. So I rented a bike. I didn't have panniers, and I just threw all my stuff in a backpack and headed up the mountain and hoped for the best. And I think that's also an important lesson too for anyone who's looking to get into bike touring or bike packing, that sometimes it seems like intimidating and really gear intensive. You can make it work with whatever gear you have, but it helps when you have other people to ride with and give you advice as you progress. But just anyone who has a bike and a backpack can make it work.
Let's talk about that gear, because I do think that's one of those things that can be a little intimidating for an activity like this. Such a wide selection of bikes to choose from. So first you have to decide what sort of bike you want and whether you want to pay $20 for a bike or $20,000 for a bike. Then you have to decide what you put on that bike. And so you have to make all the same decisions that you do as a camper or backpacker, but then also with those caveats that come along from having a bicycle as your means of transportation. So let's talk about that gear. We can maybe start with choosing a bike.
Well, never go on a bike tour on a bike that you bought for $20 or $200.
You didn't look to Lauren for validation, and she looks like she's unhappy with your answer.
I'm sorry, Lauren. I am all for old and rusty and well working, but a day ride is a day ride. And on my first bike tour, I learned that like planning a bike tour based on how much you can ride in one day on a certain bike is very different from riding 5 days on that same bike in a row. Having a bike that's not reliable, or you've never been on a long enough ride or been on it without oiling the chain or having it tuned up for like a week and riding it strenuously, you screw yourself. And I mean, I've totally screwed myself of just like starting a bike tour ill-prepared mechanically and started with a broken down bike and made a 4-day trip a 5-day trip. It sucks. In one jest, like you can actually go bike touring for $500. Like if you bought a bike in like SWAT met and like took your time and looked for deals on eBay and yada, yada, yada. All you really need is enough stuff depending on your route for one night of sleeping, and you pick up stuff along the way. Depending on the season, you can do it with a sleeping bag and a sweatshirt.
It's true. You're gonna have a much better time if you have better gear. And Nathan's right. It's funny. I just remembered now when I first bought my bike. I now have several bikes. Never thought that would happen either. But Nathan was actually one of the people I asked for advice, and I was really hoping for a lower price range. And everyone's like, "No, you're gonna have to spend like around like $800 to $1,000," which now I think that's fine. But at the time, that seemed really cost prohibitive for something I wasn't sure how often I was going to do. So I think that it is worth the investments. You can always resell bikes too. That's a good thing about them, is they hold their value. I guess I just want to share this story, and it was actually with Shantae, who was also on another podcast. And
who has a book out now.
Yeah, she has a book out, all on the PCT. She wanted to get more into bikepacking, and she actually reached out to several people, including Megan and myself. And my response to her was, these are some recommended bikes and gear, but if you don't have the money, just make it work with what you have. Use any bike you have. Borrow a bicycle, rent a bicycle, but don't let the gear get in your way of doing it. People who just want to go and maybe go for a night, you're right, 5 nights on a $20 bike, you're going to never want to bike tour again. I think that was my reaction to Nathan, though, is for people who can't obtain like a $1,000 bike right off the bat, just try to make it work with what gear you have, and just plan your trip accordingly. Maybe you can do just like a mellower 10 or 20 mile bike ride just for one overnight. And if you decide it's something you're going to get into, then it's time to invest more in a nicer bicycle. I guess the other thing is steel is something we all feel pretty strongly about. That's a common question people come across when looking to invest in a bike. And I was looking to maybe save weight, looking at aluminum, looking at carbon, and steel I think is definitely the way to go. It's stronger, it's more durable, and again, it really depends on the kind of tour you're doing, but the extra couple pounds isn't really going to make a difference.
Steel is real.
To throw out, I guess, another buzzword that you hear in the cycling world is like run what you brung. And I think I would echo that. In my first bike tour was not a 5-day tour, it was a 2-day tour, but it was on a $200 setup. I had this yard sale bike I had gotten, an old Schwinn, and a saddlebag that I had strapped on, and then I strapped the sleeping bag to the front handlebars. And looking back on it, I was probably lucky that it didn't break down, but with a little bit of knowledge, planning a route that's close to bike shops, just knowing like the limitations you have, you can make a good
Just buying bikes on the way.
Uber serving areas.
from one Craigslist ad to the next.
We've definitely had those moments where we went from one bike shop to the next bike shop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a good time. I have a reputation for overbringing, so I can't really speak to the you don't need a lot of gear, don't worry about the gear, because I'm obsessively geared up to a fault. But I don't care. I want to bring my chair. I want my 20-degree sleeping bag, even if it's not going to be cold out.
I want my Xbox.
Yeah.
Pocket
I got
bellows.
all the things. Yeah. A pocket bellows. If you don't know what a pocket bellows is, you're missing out. Yeah, but I had a lot of backpacking gear already, so it was already lightweight enough to throw on the bike, and I was really not as intimidated because that was my only sport. So I just was like, I need a tent for backpacking, I need it for bikepacking, and those all kind of go together. But I do have a tendency to bring too much like backcountry stuff on the bike tours and bikepacking because I forget that you're always like able to roll to a store if you really need it. So I have all these like extra emergency provisions, and I'm always like freaked out that nobody else has them. But I'm like, oh yeah, we're still in civilization. We'll be fine. But hey, if you need like a blood clotting rag, I'm your person.
We should talk about the chair.
The chair's an important piece of gear.
Nate should talk about the chair.
The REI folding chair. Oh, I don't want to name brands. Can we? I don't want to like.
You can name and say anything you want. Just remember, you have to live with the consequences of your actions. That's all that matters.
They well know.
Maybe they'll send you free shit.
I can guarantee you they won't.
No, they won't. No, after what I'm going to say about this other brand. I had a really bad bike tour for the first bike tour, and then I did a couple more since, and I honed in what I needed and wanted, and car camping along the way. REI, or I guess the outdoor industry, started coming out with these folding aluminum, really lightweight chairs. The lightest one is obviously the one I initially wanted to get, which was A-Light.
1 pound.
It was 1 pound, and I broke it after sitting in it one time. Mind you, I guess podcast listeners cannot see that I'm 6'1", 230 pounds, and I drink often while camping.
Nate also didn't introduce himself properly. His nickname is Nate the Destroyer.
Yes.
He got hit by a car. The car didn't make it.
Yeah, so I
True story.
break things often, including some cars that I've hit a couple times. Yeah, so I have a self Yelp like I call it the destroyer rating, like how long something lasts, and the ratio is usually if it lasts a year under my ownership, it's a lifetime guarantee. So anyway, I had the A-Light chair. It was great the first time I sat in it, then I gave up on it because it snapped underneath me, and I traded it in, and luckily I bought it at REI, and they told me, it's like, well, why don't you try out our chair? It's $15 less and 3/4 of a pound heavier. That thing lasted me like 5.5 years, and it's great. So the chair, for me, it defines like the type of attitude. Like if I'm bringing the chair, it's a certain type of tour. If I'm not bringing the chair, it's another certain type of tour. I guess that's my bike touring versus bike packing. Mm-hmm. Like I don't bring the chair if I'm bike packing.
And I don't know how much you know this, Nate, but when you first had an ultralight chair, I think a lot of us were making fun of you and thought it was really strange. Yeah. And now I think all of us have a chair.
Everyone I camp with has a chair.
Yeah.
You've introduced positive change.
Nate will also like have the chair with on like a regular bike ride and just whip it out at like a public park, and we're all sad that we don't have chairs.
I've learned, at least in Los Angeles, that as long as you leave a walkway, you can, if there are no other chairs, I can whip up my REI chair and sit next to my friends at the table with no complaints.
So other than a chair, let's talk about
nothing at all. That's all you need.
Just a chair.
Yeah, let's talk about what essential items you need to bring other than a chair.
The one I think about first always is water. I don't know.
You are very wise.
My decisions tend to flow from that. Mainly, it starts with planning, so you know where you're going to get your water. And if you have a trip you're doing where water stop is like 120 miles between water, then that's like how I decide the rest of what I bring.
Nils also brings a cast iron skillet.
Yeah, so my priorities are a little weird, but water, cast iron skillet, chair.
Yeah.
That's kind of like,
Cast iron chair. That's it.
All right, come on. I know there are other things there. You have bike tires that can blow. You've got to need more than water and a chair.
food, water, shelter, and then a way of keeping the bike running. So yeah, tires. Recently, tubeless has become a thing, and I'm fully behind that. I think saved my butt several times, touring and otherwise. But still, again, a backup for that would be a tube, patch kit, repair kit, small mechanics kit, little bits of bolts and bobs, a medical kit, cooking kit, and again, priorities like Nate said, the chair is kind of his yardstick for what kind of tour it's going to be.
If he can't fit the chair, he can't fit the other items, so the chair only goes, right?
He's pulling up a packing list.
This is the sign that I do not prepare. I prepared once a long time ago. Since then, I don't have to. This note kind of goes into a different subject, bike weight management, and where you want to put certain things. If you have a lot of water, like if you're going into the desert, you want to put your heavier things lower, as central as possible. And if that's not possible, as far forward as possible, just for being able to control this much heavier thing than a bike usually is. So I have this list that's a pannier weight management list on my phone, and this is a chair camping version, which is much like car camping for me. In the front, I bring all my, and this is, when I'm going to be really cold, all my clothes, all the warm things. This is front right pannier. All the clothes, warm things, the liner for my sleeping bag, my pad. Speaking of nice gear, I bought a really nice sleeping bag that is 20 degrees, but shrinks very, very small. So I also put my sleeping bag in there. In the other front one, I put all my food, other than snacks for the day, toiletries and fuel, the chair. And then there's usually room in there, as I said earlier, for trinkets. And also, so I usually, with that pack, I have room for 5 beers. So I can have beer or snacks or a hot dog or whatever. And then the rear, I strap my tent poles to, if you can divide your tent poles from your tents, it's a lot easier to pack things. Because I'm already bringing a bunch of shit, I just strap it to the rear rack that I have on, stuff my tent into the rear pannier. That leaves a lot of room for just stuff that you're gonna waste your money on. And I don't know, I buy bottles of wine and pineapples. And this one time we camped and a whole day we were gonna be on the beach, and I had to Google Earth it, and there was no shelter, so I bought an umbrella.
That umbrella was clutch.
Yeah, Nils was there, and you never know what you're going to need to bring along, so I like to pack for cargo room.
And it's a huge advantage biking over backpacking. I feel like I very ultralight anymore when I backpack, and when I'm biking, you just carry more sort of luxury items and non-essentials. I don't really backpack with my chair, and I have instant coffee, but when I'm bikepacking, coffee grinders, that's kind of I think another big luxury item that a lot of us have, and pour over coffees. An extra 10 pounds in a backpack you're really going to feel it. It's going to dramatically slow down your progress. An extra 10 pounds on your bike, it really won't make a significant difference.
Yeah, you can travel with a lot more booze.
Megan has all the luxury items.
I do. I'm a little bit overboard. I think that the main investment needs to be in a sleep system, and maybe that's a backpacking rule of thumb. But for me, the comfort in having one of those blow up mattresses, the little backpacking raft that you sleep on was game changing for me. I didn't get that in the beginning, and I would just throw a blanket down in a tent and lay down on it, and then I was oh, that's why camping sucks. You need this stuff, and then it's totally comfortable. So I would definitely spend some money on the pad thing, a good sleeping bag that's lightweight that you can pack down. I got mine at REI on one of their sales, but I did get a 20-degree bag because I find it to be the most versatile. And I have one of those typical backpacking tents, a big Agnes, one person. I can't remember the one, but whatever. Everybody knows these things. These backpacking brands, there's 3 good kinds, in my opinion.
Let's name all the ones you don't like and see if they'd like to sponsor the show.
Yeah. No, it's more styles. I hate a single wall tent. I don't want to wake up in condensation. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of them just aren't lightweight enough, and some of them break.
Research a company's lifetime guarantee.
Yeah.
Big Agnes, thank you. Big shout out to Big Agnes. Thank you for all your lifetime help. Got a tent coming your way.
So I have a very specific question. What is everyone's opinion on those those self-healing, goo-filled tires.
I guess that would be another word for tubeless.
Oh,
Well, they're also the tubes you can buy that they're filled with a green goo or whatever, and they're supposed to heal themselves.
Okay, I've never used
Slime,
those
like
slime
slime?
tubes.
No.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's a big no from everyone.
I know of those from BMX riding because you get thorns a lot, especially in Southern California, arid areas where we don't get rain much. They really, really suck because instead of, well, I mean, they were a great thing at one point in time, but now that tubeless tires exist, they're kind of obsolete. You're adding a lot of weight with a lower quality of like durability. Yeah, it's not as durable for heavier weight. I mean, tubeless is great as long as you maintain it. You can have small punctures, and you can even have some pinch flats or you avoid pinch flats sometimes while being tubeless on dirt roads, and you can also run a lower pressure and it's more comfortable. Slime really does. I'm not keen on that. It's just a bunch of gunk in it. Sometimes it can get gunked up in a certain spot, and then it changes the rotational weight, and then it feels like there's a lump in your tire, and it's weird. I often tour with tubes, carrying a chair, and so I bring like 3 tubes. I also bring like a spare tire depending on the route that I'm going. Like, I bring a spare tire, and foldable tires are a thing. They can fit into panniers.
So let's talk about your options for travel, right? So you've mentioned panniers a bunch of times, but you also could drag a trailer behind you, or you could use bags. What are everyone's opinions on when you would want those?
I might sound judgy here, but I'm going to go for it. I feel like trailers are sort of like an old dude thing. I don't know. It's like old school. Maybe not old dude, but old school. Yeah, it seems like it'd be cool if you were like lugging a cooler or something, but 2 things just have different uses. Like my panniers, I can shove so much stuff in there and I can leave room to like add more stuff, But with the bike packing bag setup, it's more nimble. It's streamlined. It's like on your bike. It's like with the line of your bike. So there's a bag in the triangle, like a frame bag. There's like a bag under your seat that's stuck and like flying around under your butt. And then there's like a roll bag on your handlebars. The bummer town of that setup is like, yeah, you can bring like no chair sometimes. Not a lot of cooking gear, But the cool thing is you're on a bike, so you might be able to just go pick up a burrito and then bring it with you, So it's not like you have to do the terrible dehydrated meals. But yeah, the panniers are more just like anything goes. You can just bring anything. And the bike packing bags are also maybe harder to find and harder to figure out because they're kind of newer. A few of us have had our buddy Nils here make us custom frame bags because we're the luckiest people ever to have this wonderful friend who will do that for us. But I don't know how the heck else you get a frame bag that fits your bike exactly. You're going to get something wonky maybe that's like going to be kind of lumpy and not fit.
Oh, I have a previous podcast with Rogue Panda that you should listen to, because if you send him measurements of your bike, he will custom make you a frame bag. Not to take away from Nils here.
No, I don't know that Nils wants the notoriety of being a frame bag maker.
Yeah, no. That's true.
Nils is going to be getting a lot of DMs
Sorry, Nils.
about some frame bags. From what I had heard about frame bag custom makers, like, it gets really backed up. They're really nice quality, and I know that like it's just like if it's not custom fit, then it kind of doesn't fit to your bike. And then I guess, yeah, if you have the time to like really plan out a vacation, like I'm going to go on this thing in June next year, I can order this thing now. I know a lot of people that got those things, and now bikepacking is a very big thing now. Some wait times are a year for a bike bag. Revelate Designs makes really good stuff.
And it's not just custom frames. It's awesome. Nils also makes custom handlebar bags. And I think the handlebar bag, for me, is kind of like the coolest of all the bags. I think you can get away with only having a handlebar bag, and there's some really cool styles. It's like really big. It tucks in between your handlebars, and it'll often have like a clear covering where you can put in maps or directions, and if you're going really light, you can get away with like just having that. And they're super stylish. They look a little bit vintagey sometimes, and it's usually where you keep the items that you're going to access the most. So I feel like that's the bag that's kind of most important for organizational purposes and good access to gear.
Swift Industries also makes really awesome, I think that randoneering bags.
French word, randoneering. Big shout out to Swift.
Yeah, I ride with an amazing Swift bag that I borrowed from Nils. But it fits everything. It's so crazy the amount of things I can fit in that bag. And I just left it on, even as like now it's on my bike that I ride to work, and I can just like do anything after work. Before I have all the locks in there. Like no one brings a lock. I have 5 locks. Like I can fit a whole bunch of wine and like 6-pack and whatever. Like I can bring. It's great.
You said you borrowed it from him, but it sounds like you have permanently borrowed it from him.
Stop. No, Nils can have it back anytime. But really, I'll keep it forever. If it needs to be warmed by my bicycle tire, it's got a home.
Bags are made for being used, so.
So let's talk about food. Lots of people seem to be very interested in what people do about food. Whether you bring food, whether you cook on the road, whether you're buying stuff from stores, or whether it depends.
I'm hoping Nils will cook for me most of the time with his cast iron skillet. No, I bring too much stuff. I bring all the backpacking meals and then go to the store and buy a whole meal to cook. So don't do what I do.
I feel like a lot of the time we just ride bikes to go eat food in a beautiful place. I love to cook. I love to cook for other people too. So a lot of the times I end up, like Megan said, with a cast iron skillet. Kind of a ridiculous setup to be carrying around on a bike to make something I like. But I think all of us have been to Henninger and camped there. That place is one of my favorite to do an overnighter. And I think it exhibits the idea the most where you can go from both extremes. Like you can go to Henninger during the summer with just a burrito and a hammock and literally nothing else, water or beer, so burrito, a beverage, and a hammock, and be totally fine. And that could be your camping experience. Or you could go and carry a trailer with a cooler and a cast iron skillet and cook like a bunch of food and have a great party. And that would be the other end of the experience.
So what kind of stuff are you cooking in that cast iron skillet? Do you have preferences for what you bring, things that pack better or keep longer?
I think carrying certain staples and then seeing what you find on the road. Is my favorite approach. Like you'll find maybe a fresh like fruit stand or a fresh vegetable stand along the side, and like they happen to have a bunch of tomatoes. So like, what can I cook with these tomatoes? Or they happen to have some really great squash, and it's like, okay, this is what I'm cooking tonight. And I think if I have a couple kind of staples, almost like backups that I know I won't, be in trouble, and then kind of see what emerges.
I often like to buy food while I go. Again, it sort of depends on the trip. If I'm doing something that's a little bit more of a wilderness trip, obviously you have to bring your food. But one piece of advice I received was to sort of build your trip around themes. So this summer I spent like 2 months touring, and I made a point to stop at a lot of breweries and bakeries. And so I didn't really need to bring much food, and I just had an opportunity to stop at a lot of cool places, try a lot of new types of food, and also meet a lot of cool people when you're stopping. If you're just, it can be a little bit more expensive. There's trade-offs to everything. This also can be time-consuming to cook food, so there's lots of things to consider. But I did sort of like buying food along the way, especially because I was traveling solo a lot. So it sort of ended up being my opportunity to socialize.
Burritos work well. Trader Joe's sells a bean and cheese burrito for $3. Throw one of those in your bag, ride all day. It's warm by the time you get to camp. Boom, done.
I feel like burritos are always people's answer to all of people's packing issues.
They're so damn portable. They come in their own edible package,
There's also even a handlebar bag that's called a burrito bag, and it's perfectly sized for putting in a burrito and just bringing it up to Henninger. A couple burritos.
I think anything, back to the just bring your essentials and then find what you can get on the way. I do a lot of solo touring, so you don't really have to worry about like getting to camp on time for people or like everyone having a dinner time. So sometimes like, again, I have a lot of room, so I just, you buy a whole pizza in the middle of the day. You eat through it during the day, and then you still have like 6 pieces when you get to camp. I mean, that's the bare minimum. And then like, the flip side and preparing stuff, powdered eggs. I mean, anything tastes good if you add spice to it. So, I mean, you can get a lot of the pre-made spice packets at grocery stores in town if you're flying, or, beforehand if you're just driving to somewhere or riding to somewhere. Trader Joe's, I mean, they have a lot of stuff that's just like add rice kind of stuff, but you don't have to add rice. You can add hot dogs or whatever. Like
that's what it says on the back. Add rice or hot dogs.
Yeah, I mean you can. That's the great. I mean, like Neil. I mean, I'm not a cook as much as Nils is,
Oh, I had no idea that they would.
Hot dogs only.
I'm much more of a bare bones kind of hot dogs at camp kind of guy, and oatmeal in the morning, and then eat pizza on the way. But otherwise, like I think it's just like if you can just be imaginative with spices you can find in a grocery store and just carbohydrates, you need those things if you're riding multiple days, obviously, and then type of protein, whether it be nuts or whatever, tofu or a hamburger.
I think the interesting thing about bike touring, bike packing, is it can be kind of an exercise in discomfort or in how far you're willing to push like different ends. Like you see some people who are doing ultra endurance bike packing events and they're surviving like on the bare minimum. So you can find lists online, for example, of calorie density of all Trader Joe's items. And you can find that coconut oil is probably the most caloric density item you could get and eat from Trader Joe's. And so maybe like your decision is you want to go really light, or your decision is you want to go really cost effective. So maybe the one tour is, I have these tortillas and I have peanut butter and I have this cheese and this is what I'm going to eat until I don't have that anymore. And then, find it. And I think all of those, like I've done all of those kinds of tours and they can all be fun.
So sometimes you're going somewhere that's further away than you can drive and you have to get your bike there. It's usually pretty easy to get a person somewhere on an airplane or a train or whatever other form of transportation you take, like maybe a boat. How do you get your bike there? Or do you? Do you buy a bike there?
Trains are the best. I love trains that you can bring a bike on. There's only a few that are like, it's complicated. They don't make it easy. You have to know like which stops are okay to unload your bike from the train and that type of thing. Amtrak's getting better. I like Metrolink because you can just bring your bike on and take it off yourself. But Amtrak, you have to like put it in a separate car. And then somebody's messing with it. And then you have to make sure you don't get off at the station where they won't unload it for you. Or buy bicycle. But that's still really, really cool that Amtrak's trying to get more bike friendly. Flying with my bike was a whole interesting set of new anxieties that I didn't know existed.
I don't know why you would get anxious. Baggage is handled so delicately at airports.
Yeah, I don't know why people fly with their bikes, but it is a thing. I do know why, because I did it. And you want your bike. You just want your damn bike. You don't want somebody else's bike. You don't want to rent a bike. You don't want a mystery bike. You want your bike that you love and that you ride all the time and that fits you well and that fits all your stuff. You want your bike, right? But then getting it there, like, I don't know, I bought this bike box that was like not a cardboard box, but not like a fancy bike thing. It was sort of like an in-between bike box, but it came with like wheels on it for like $120. So I was like, at least I can roll the damn thing because I'm by myself with like my duffel bag that somehow has to fit on the bike. I don't know, it's crazy. But flying to Portland is cool because they have the bicycle like putting together area. Oh, I just hit the mic. Sorry about that.
You're off the show.
Fuck, bye. No, Portland has the bike putting together area. Are there any other airports you guys know of that have the little bike mechanic area?
Minneapolis.
That's just such a treat. You get there and they're like, look, we know you brought a bike. And you're like, yay, I'm here. Except I didn't know that was going to happen. So I still had already had an appointment at a bike shop and just had the bike shop put it together. Shout out to Gladys Bikes in Portland. That's the thing. So I had like door-to-door appointments where I had an appointment at Golden Saddle, awesome bike shop here in Los Angeles, Golden Saddle Cyclery, to put my bike in the damn little box for me. They had to take it like all the way apart. And then I had to Uber, Lyft. Actually, nobody uses Uber anymore. Lyft to, I had to Lyft to Gladys,
Commies.
Right? I know. But I had an appointment there because, like, what if they were too busy? And, like, so I guess that would be my tip. Make sure if you're not a mechanic, like, I'm not that mechanically inclined. I'm also lazy and I didn't want to carry a pedal wrench and all that BS with me. So make appointments. The bike shops really appreciate it. Nobody wants you to be like the guy with like half your bike taken apart the morning when everybody's supposed to start, and there you are with like all your parts on the ground. Like, no fun. But yeah, the bike shops are super accommodating.
You already threw Uber under the bus. You want to throw a certain bike shipping company under the bus?
Oh, yeah.
So my philosophy is now you're going on vacation, spend the money and just fly with your bike. Well, I'll go further into how you actually save money flying with your bike. But one time I shipped my bike because I wanted to save money. It's essentially the company that anybody will tell you to use if you ask, hey, who should I ship my bike through? My bike got damaged. That wasn't their problem. That was FedEx's problem. So that's a whole other thing.
I'm sure it was your problem once you got the bike.
Yes, it was very much my problem. But also just the logistics of having to try to ship your bike and dealing with a third-party company that's trying to ship it for you, and I had to spend my whole day that I was gonna spend in DC, exploring DC, figuring out shipping labels with a company that wasn't picking up my phone calls. I am a fan of
Getting rained on?
I'm so sorry.
They're all direction.
Sorry.
No, this is great. They're not pointed at us at all.
They're not so the sprinklers have gone off,
Super loud.
but we're in the safe zone.
So anyway, you're talking about shipping your bike, and then
Right. So I flew with my bike once, and I didn't know how expensive it was going to be, and I paid a lot of money, and it sucked. So the next time I flew with a bike, I shipped it, and it was something I didn't want to deal with on the front end and the back end, so I went back to flying my bike. I did a little bit more research. You can find out certain companies like Alaska, JetBlue, depending on where they're going, Southwest, Virgin, it's all $50 each way to take a bike. Otherwise, it's usually about $150 each way. I go on bike tours all throughout the year, but I go on bigger ones where I have to fly to them twice a year, counts it as my vacation. And once you're there, you're bike touring, so it's way cheaper than having to rent a car and then drive everywhere and stay in Airbnbs and blah, blah, blah. If you're going on this vacation, why not just spend the money and be sure that you're going to have your bike there safely? Oh, another note, though, regarding TSA. Just when you take your bike apart, all the hardware, all the nuts, all the bolts, everything that would fall out of a case, if they opened it for any reason, put it in your carry-on so you don't lose all of your nuts and your bolts.
that is great advice.
Yes, yeah, it happens to me.
I would say from what I've heard and personal experience, TSA will always search bike boxes.
Yes.
None of us have folding bikes, so that's probably why it didn't come up. But that is a really good option for people who do a lot of flying. I think Brampton and some folding bikes can actually fit on a carry-on. So because of that, I've actually considered purchasing one, but I don't think I'm quite there yet.
Would you recommend a Razor scooter instead?
Hey, whatever works.
I would say no.
No.
And then, yeah, another pro tip. I kind of bought international ticket on Priceline, and they ended up switching carriers that I was on at the last second. And I specifically researched, it is important because, as Nathan said, the cost of flying with your bike can be $150 each way, which can add like an extra $300 to your ticket. So I made sure to fly on one of the airlines that was more affordable. And of course they switched to one that was more expensive. I just very nicely spoke to the agent's manager until they didn't charge me $150.
I think nicely just now was a euphemism for very angrily.
And it's interesting. We can talk about, I think, adventure cycling. They're a really, really great group that have provide a ton of resources to people who bike tour, and they actually do some sort of like lobbying, I think, of Amtrak and some organizations. And so people who are concerned about, you know, maybe limited reservations that Amtrak has for cyclists or $150 airplane fees, they should write these organizations and tell them how they feel, let them know that like bike tourists pay attention and say, hey, I was going to buy a flight on your airline, but I didn't because it was so much money. Amtrak now has locked containers for guns on every single train, so they do listen to lobbyists. And Adventure Cycling has been working to lobby Amtrak to allow for more bike spaces on their trains.
So let's talk about when you get to where you're trying to go and you want to figure out how to get from point A to point B and C and every other point. What do you do to navigate from where you are to where you want to be?
I believe more in hard copy maps than computers, just because of service and satellite capabilities, and then also battery power. And I'm already worrying about if I don't have a generator hub, well, which I do, but if you don't have a generator hub, you gotta like charge other things, and like conserving energy, you don't want to, or at least I don't want to be the guy that asks for a cup of coffee and then plugs in 12 devices into your outlet. So I like maps, and so they're also kind of fun. I didn't take the class, but our friend Molly Revelo took the class, and I mooched off of her and learned what she learned.
The class.
She now teaches the class.
So you're recommending mooched education.
Yes, mooched education. Oh yes, isn't that what this is a podcast about sharing info,
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Or information mooching, if you prefer.
No, I believe more in reading maps, because also when you don't have a predestined route on a computer device, you can look at things around you. Like, let's say you're making way better time than you planned on making, and you have 2 hours to kill before you even want to get to camp. You can look at different towns and then turn on your device and research those towns and find out like what's in those towns to do. Or if you were out in the middle of nowhere, obviously you don't have any service, and depending on your maps, if you're in California, Tom Harrison is
trail.
He does a lot of Western stuff, and then Adventure Cycling does a really good job of doing certain routes and telling you the best way to go via bike, as well as like where bike shops are and restaurants and bars and coffee shops and hotels and campgrounds. And then obviously Google Earth is a great thing too. Obviously that's more of a prep thing, but to save Google Earth snapshots of where you want to go, and you can kind of compare it to when you have reception and when you don't.
Just using multiple avenues of research before you start on a trip, whether it's a map from like ACA and then checking it against like other research by calling a local bike shop is a great way to start. If you're focused on a specific area, they'll often have inside knowledge, local knowledge about the area and can point you in the right direction. But just having like a rough picture of where you're going and then contingency plans. And not depending on one source. So not depending only on Google Maps. Specifically, don't depend only on Google Maps. That's quite dangerous. But, don't just rely on one information source.
Yeah. Last resort.
Don't anger the monstrosity that is Google or Alphabet.
I would actually like to comment, Google Maps, maybe take some insight from cyclists and don't send them up a mountain because it's the shortest distance.
Yeah, it doesn't always factor in elevation, which the adventure cycling maps do, so I really like them. And then sometimes they just don't know the shoulder width. I definitely have almost died a couple times from Google Maps telling me, and it's my own fault, of course, too. It's as Nils just said, you need to do multiple avenues of research. But I did find myself on a road that was listed as very safe for cyclists, where there was no shoulder. It was 4 lanes, 60 miles an hour, and I just hopped over the railing with my loaded bike and kind of bushwhacked for a while. Honestly, don't know what else I would have done.
I would like to second Nathan's vote for the paper map. And if you don't know how to read a paper map like I did not, then there are classes our friend Molly teaches.
Yeah, or you can mooch off of other people.
I don't recommend. I mean, if you're a good learning by osmosis person, I just am not. I have to actually do the thing 50 times. I'm honestly, maps come really, really bad to me. I have no sense of direction. So I go overboard, as is my theme in this podcast. Is how the many ways I go overboard, and I plan the route usually via 5 different things. So I will always bring a paper map, but I will also have downloaded the route onto 3 different apps on my phone, and I'll have multiple battery backups already ready. I don't even mess with thinking I'm going to plug something in. Backcountry stuff, it's a whole other world back there. You can really just die. Yeah. Don't take it lightly. As soon as you're more than 2 miles into the backcountry, be really, really prepared. One thing that I highly recommend is calling a ranger. I generally always call the rangers in any area. A lot of times it's hard to figure out what roads you can even bring a bike on. So I want to know, that they know we're in the area and that we're not pissing anybody off. Sometimes, of course, you're not always going to follow the ranger's directions. You're always going to follow the ranger's directions. But every once in a while, you have to get a little creative. But with weather stuff, it's important to know. This last year we had... in California, there was so much rain that a lot of the dirt trails and roads were just not the same as they were even 6 months prior. Yeah, we were just trying to figure out what the current conditions are. We had those mudslides in Big Sur affected another one of our tours, and we wanted to not have to do an in and out on the same road. We had to ride Nacimiento-Ferguson Road, which is really, really beautiful, but crazy 1 lane. It was the only way in and out of Big Sur. All the traffic for all the tourists were going on that road, plus the construction trucks. So it sounded real sketchy. Ended up being real beautiful, but we tried so hard to find a dirt way out of there and take dirt routes all the way through. And I got a hold of some rangers that actually had some information, because sometimes they don't. With the backcountry rangers only check in every few weeks sometimes. But yeah, I was told that what used to be a public road is now private, and they have fences up, and they have shotguns, and you won't be able to pass. So you would have done all that work to climb out on the dirt and have to go back to the road, which you never want to do, which is why I'm not a big fan of winging it. You can hear the anxiety in my voice just saying the phrase winging it, but I aspire to be someone who can wing it. I aspire to be someone who can just feel I'm just going where the wind takes me, but I'm not there yet. In the meantime, I'm preparing the hell out of myself But even if you are just trying to have a good time and wing it, always prepare if you're in the backcountry. Like, don't mess around with the water sources. Always know where your water source is. That kind of stuff is like the difference between a good trip and you potentially like having to be airlifted out, you know?
I'm a huge fan of winging it, but my number one rule is don't die. But yeah, the easiest way to deal with getting from point A to point B is don't have a point B. I love to just kind of meander around and figure things out as I go along. I think that's the best way to have an adventure.
I have a feeling the two of you disagree.
But we travel well together still somehow.
I think, well, that's a whole other thing, sort of the group dynamics as opposed to biking solo. And when you're biking with a group, it's all about communication and figuring out what other people are comfortable with. And like Megan, I actually aspire to be a little more prepared. That was a lesson learned when I was hopping over a rail with a loaded bike while cars zipped by at 65 miles an hour. I was like, maybe this is the downside of winging it. So I think sometimes you can like complement each other too.
Yeah. For sure. I think that I'll have a friend who, on the trip who will be like, maybe we just try going this way instead of the route that you planned 5 or 6 different ways. And like, I really do my best to like go with those moments, and be willing to just like scrap the plan as well as I plan. Like, I also want to be really like 100% okay with scrapping it if something cool turns out, because you never know. It's like we went to a winery on the Big Sur trip I was talking about, and a local told us about this road that we hadn't heard anything about from any cycling routes or any of the hours and hours of research I spent. And these locals were like, oh, what was it? Oh, I don't want to say because I don't want other people finding out about it, right? We're not going to tell you.
He called it the most beautiful road in California. Yeah. It was stunning.
You can DM us if you want to know what road it is, but it's fan-freaking-tastic. It was really just such a treat to have a surprise road like that. So I think it's also important to plan and then scrap the plan if it comes up.
Exactly.
Let's talk about hazards. And I imagine the first, largest, worst hazard of all is human beings in cars.
Yep.
They're just human beings.
Depends on what you're doing. Sometimes bike tours don't involve cars or people. Sometimes you're in the forest for a couple of days and bears are the hazard, or lack of water. Yeah, I guess in either sense, even if it is a human being, it's nice to have some sort of protection or noise maker. If this is, again, obviously if you're solo camping with bears, obviously you want to make as much noise and stuff like that. But then people, it depends on if you're thug camping or not. You want to be smart about where you're going.
What?
I've heard so many terms for that, and I've never heard anyone call it thug camping.
Definition of thug camping, yeah.
Well, I think thug camping is different from hobo camping. Like, hobo camping is like somewhere on a beach or like in a river bottom. Thug camping is like behind a liquor store or...
I've heard it called stealth camping. I like that. Thug camping's better. Stealth, I'm like, you're not a ninja. You just didn't feel like paying for a campsite. Like,
well, yeah, thug camping is not very stealth if you're not good at it. I learned a lot about it. Minnesota nice in northern Minnesota. It's an ironic statement. They're not nice up there. Not all of them. There were a lot of people that were very nice that actually saved me. And
are you sure you don't just make a sweeping generalization about an entire state and leave it at that?
Yeah, the casino in the neighboring hotel in Carlton, Minnesota. You guys suck.
Boo. I don't know why, but I just support you, Nathan. Boo.
I'll take my gambling dollars elsewhere.
And then, cars, you want to be as visible as possible. I typically wear all black, and my touring bike is gray, which is not a great thing. So
that might explain the cars that you've totaled with your bike and body.
Well,
apparently.
so as we talked about before, I've never been in a car accident on a bike tour. Just while commuting and riding my bike around town. But that's all the thing. Don't have a very visible bike inherently, and I always wear black and gray. You can buy tape that's reflective by 3M that you can tape on your racks, safety triangles, while seeming nerdy. Actually, safety pizza is a non-nerdy alternative to a safety triangle. A safety triangle is something that goes on the back of your bike to, same thing that like long hauls will have on the back of their trucks. But there's this guy's safety pizza that makes it kind of fun. It gives you a lot of toppings to put onto an orange and yellow pizza, reflective mushrooms and pepperonis. Yeah, just being as visible as possible. Some people have flags.
Do any of you like those lights that go around your tires and all along your bike?
I had one of those.
They shook their head because they all understand that in an audio format, visuals are
Yes.
I know what they are, but I don't use them.
I had a roommate give me like just a rear wheel one, like the red, like the whole wheel lights up. It was in your spokes. Yeah, I felt invincible with that damn light on. But it took 4 AA batteries, and it had to be like crazily installed and then uninstalled to get the batteries back in. So it went 1 round of batteries and then was garbage. But it was fun. I felt real powerful. Those lights on.
The one thing I wanted to say, I think the reason you didn't get a resounding, vigorous nodding when you said that drivers are probably the biggest obstacle is, and I'll be curious if other people agree with this statement, but wherever I bike tour, people ask like, oh, are you scared? Isn't this dangerous? And I'm like, I live in Los Angeles. Nowhere that I've toured has been scarier than my daily commute to work. Yeah. And I feel like in some ways, I guess I'm a little bit lucky for that. There's just many times other bike tours, they all warn me about Route 1 in Baja, Mexico. They're like, oh, the trucks, it's brutal. It was nothing. I wasn't even the tiniest bit scared. It was just nothing compared with my daily commute downtown LA.
And also, people just get stoked on you with a bunch of shit on your bike. They give you room, typically. It depends on where you're bike touring. Like if you're bike touring Laguna Beach, it's a different thing. But if you're bike touring like in Crater Lake or Death Valley or something, they'll give you room. Or typically you're going to see those same people all day long because they're spending, all day in their car, 15 minutes at a time outside of it, and just driving around the park. But it's a different world when you're bike touring because you're that's the whole point. You're getting out of, I don't know, LA or whatever city you're living in. You're going more outside. It's like the people around you are also on vacation. Typically, I don't know. Just got to be smart about it.
You mentioned that people always ask you questions about, is it dangerous? Is it this? Is it that? What are some of the misconceptions that people have? What are those questions that you get? And then what are the answers to those questions?
I feel like people a lot of times don't realize how easy it is to get places on a bicycle. We a lot of times do just from LA to Leo Carrillo. Yeah. And people will catch us in Westlake. They're like, oh my God, you came from Los Angeles? It's like, yeah, we've been riding for like 2 hours maybe. It's actually, when you're not racing, and you're not trying to exert as much effort as possible, it's chill. That's the whole idea of bike touring, is that it's chill. And even if you don't make it to your destination, you have everything with you. Right. So like, if you find a nice little field or liquor store, you can just camp there.
I think another misconception is people who think they're not in good enough shape. I feel like we have a lot of friends that are like, oh, I haven't been on a bike in months. I can't possibly ride with you guys or couldn't possibly do that trip, and I feel like you just get in shape as you go, and people told me that with the AIDS life cycle too, and I didn't believe it, but it's totally true. The key is just getting out there and doing it and going somewhere. Most people I've found, because I'm usually the slowest person on any bike tour I go on, everybody's just stoked that everybody's there. We're just like, yay, we have friends to go do this ridiculous thing with for a few days. We all get thrilled out of the same thing. Like, we're so lucky to have people to do this with. Everyone's been always really just kind and not making me feel as bad as I make myself feel about being the slowest person on the ride. And I think that most people would find that in any group, that everybody's just happy to have more buddies out there. So use your friends as resources. Everybody just wants more. It's like the more the merrier. We want everyone to come.
Everyone is lonely and we all need friends.
It's true. It's true.
That's funny, because I was just about to say a common misconception is on solo tours that I'm just a magnet for weird old dudes when I'm riding my bike. Everyone thinks you just clearly want lots of company and you want someone with you talking nonstop the whole time for the rest. And you're like, hey, I have bike buddies. I just wanted a trip to clear my head and not make mindless conversation.
That's a good point.
I typically, depends on, when you go into the hiking bikes, depending on where you are, there's different realms of people that hang out and hiking bikes. Yeah. And you just gotta be smart about it, and but it definitely is. I'm also a more direct and loud and obnoxious person, especially after I'm tired or just getting back from the bar towards camp. I just make it known that this is my area and this is where I'm staying. I think at the same time, the greatest thing about bike touring is that you meet a lot of people, but you also have to look out for yourself. We were riding from Pittsburgh to DC. Once we hit the South a little bit more, we walked into a bar and like just the record screeched, and it's just, you just gotta you read the room. Just, don't act entitled. Don't act like you belong here because you worked as hard. I mean, you do deserve that beer, but also like people don't know, and people like also like depends on where you are, like aren't really into the same things you're into.
99% of the people you meet are fabulous though, but it's true, you have to sort of just read the room. It's you're in an unfamiliar territory, and I have had some uncomfortable situations, but by and large, usually I wake up at campsites to people saying, hey, I saw you biking alone, here's breakfast. Or every time I'd go in a brewery, someone was buying me a beer or whatever. So, just be smart, use your instincts.
I don't really have much to add other than like I would echo that, risk management. So there's definitely some hike-a-bikes near here that I wouldn't feel comfortable camping in alone. I would even rather thug camp or bandit camp nearby than stay in that hike-a-bike. But then there are others that I feel totally comfortable sleeping in by myself and just showing up, late at night and then, rolling out early in the morning.
And explain exactly what a hike and bike is.
A lot of the state parks, the ones in California I know most are along the coast here, will have what's called a hike and bike site. And it's usually an area reserved within the campsite just for hikers or cyclists. And you won't have a car, usually a slightly cheaper site designed, just for people who are hiking through or biking through. No reservations needed or even usually available.
So tell us how you go about planning where you're going to go, how you find out about what kind of routes are available or places you might want to take your bike. And then if you can think of one, recommend a nice beginner route for people who are maybe trying their very first bikepacking trip.
Yeah, okay. I do really like to plan. So when, of course, my very first bikepacking trip, I planned for, and I was lucky enough to have Lauren volunteer to come with and enthusiastically show me the way. That was my first time.
No way.
Yeah, with you and Danny and me and
Crystal Cove.
Jeremy. Yeah, and I thought it was a really great beginner route. We met up at Union Station probably. Mm-hmm. We rode to the river path that goes to Long Beach, which unfortunately doesn't connect with the other river path, but that's hello, LA.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Get on it. No, so you get on it in some weird industrial part. That's the worst part of the ride, is getting to that river path. But it's a straight shot to Long Beach, and then you kind of just follow one to Crystal Cove. And the thing about Crystal Cove is they have these really cool cottages that everyone's trying to book, and it's like so hard to book that everybody forgets that there's campsites there that are 3 miles in off a dirt road, and it's a ocean view, and you hike up a little bit. I mean, I couldn't ride my bike up the 3 miles of dirt. It was too loaded and it was too steep and rutted. But hey, pushing your bike, no shame in it. 3 miles pushing your bike, whoop-de-doo. Who cares? Took like however long it took. I was just like thrilled to be there. And riding downloaded first time on dirt, a little bit scary, but it was great. Yeah, just like there's a Trader Joe's nearby. The beach is nearby. We got to go get our groceries at Trader Joe's and then have a beer on the beach, and it was fantastic. So I definitely recommend that as a good first timer. It's relatively flat too, which I think is nice for a first time. 50 miles there.
I think it's a little more, but yeah, I was
maybe 60.
Funny. I was going to recommend that for a beginner one too. It's perfect.
Yeah, you recommended it to me. There I am.
You have to pick a new one now.
So I guess another one I would pick, this one is off a transit connection. I'd like to, you asked how to plan trips, and I do like to try to plan them off of transit connections. To me, it's not as fun to sort of drive someplace with my bike. So I either want to be able to leave my house and bike there, or to hop on Metrolink or Amtrak. So I would say actually take the train up in LA to Ventura, and there's a great bike path there, and there's a ton of campsites in that area. You can go to Ojai, and if you're really ambitious, this might be beginner to intermediate. You can actually sort of bike east and hook up with the Metrolink station that's sort of near Antelope Valley or Lancaster, I guess. Palmdale, thank you. But yeah, if Ventura has a great bike path. It's beautiful. There's plenty of accommodations. You could even do credit card camping if you don't have the camping gear. And that's just, finding an Airbnb or a hotel and buying your way out of your problems. But yeah, usually when I'm looking to plan a trip, I think the first thing I do is sort of just ask around. That's, yay social media. Just ask friends, hey, I'm looking to tour in this area. Do you know any good routes? And I think that's one of the best ways to, way better than Google Maps, is to just hear it from other cyclists. I know Thad is, people should just ask Thad. Yeah. he's really good at recommending sort of routes that have like lower elevation.
All right, so everyone become friends with Thad, and your problems will be solved.
For planning routes, it often, for me, centers around a certain idea. Like maybe there's one place I want to go on a trip and then build something around that. Or maybe I want to try the train from here to San Luis Obispo and see, what can you build around that trip? And I think it usually starts with like one element, and then in the research phase, you find other interesting things. And then if you're doing solo, just your own interests. But if you're with a group, you talk to the other people, and then the trip kind of flows from there.
A really great resource is Crazy Guy on the Bike. It's a website, crazyguyonabike.com. Once you decide your rough destination where you want to be, just go on that website, and it's essentially just a long kept forum of bike journals of cyclotourists. You can kind of see what other people have done route-wise and which ways to go and stuff like that. But as far as like easiest way, the easiest tour that I've done now was actually a Rails to Trail, which was mind-blowing. And I've planned so many tours based on Rails to Trail since this one. I did the Allegheny and the C&O Canal Path from Pittsburgh to DC, and it's essentially it's perfect for cyclotouring because it's already flat because it was already graded for trains. The cities are built around the distance that an old train could make, which is about 20 miles. So every 20 miles you have a town, and then along these more developed trails are campgrounds, which are hike and bike, which you'd like put in like a $5 bill into this little box, and it has water and all these things. So like you really don't have to plan anything except for your flight. Railstotrail.org I think is the organization that puts is making all this happen. Katy Trail is another really awesome one that I've been meaning to do. And then on the other end of it, when they're more path less traveled, Google Earth is actually, while their directions aren't great for cyclists, their application is amazing to scope out roads and dirt roads, and literally just looking at an area like, I want to go on this mountain bike trail in Joshua Tree, but what is this little squiggly line? And you zoom in and you can kind of, again, take screenshots and stuff for reference later. You can explore that way, and then that that kind of blends more into the not as off the beaten path, just to scope out roads to see the margin of like the median that you can ride in, and how sketchy a road is to ascend or descend.
So you just named a bunch of them. Are there any other websites you guys recommend, especially if you know any that are really useful for people that would be outside of California, somewhere else in the nation?
We've mentioned, I think several of us have mentioned American Cycling Association, ACA. They put together really well planned out routes with stop information at various stops, with food, lodging, bikes. Those are really well put together routes. And I think they even have tours that they lead. So they'll have someone who's a more experienced bicycle tourist, and they'll have them as kind of a leader. So that's a great one.
I've been looking at bikepacking.com for some ideas for backcountry stuff out of state. I'm really obsessed with their right up on the BCT, the Black Canyon Trail in Arizona, and that's like next on my list. I had the flu last year when some buddies went to it, so I'm just gotta go. I'm dying to go. They have some really cool, more bike packing than the road stuff, which I'm sort of looking more and more to get into. I also think the Radavist is a good resource. They don't exactly post the routes per se, but their like write-ups on the tours that people are doing are sort of inspirational. You're like, oh wow, look at that area, that looks awesome. And sometimes they're on like sort of tried and true routes already. So if you do a little research on the area they're in, you can kind of find out what other cyclists have been doing in that area and find a route. And they also post a lot about the different bikes, and it's sort of like a bike resource, I guess.
I'm going to give again a shout out to the local bike shop. I think we're lucky to have a fairly well connected local bike shop that we all use. But again, in wherever you are planning your tour, that's a great place to start. And if they don't have the information, probably can point you in the direction of someone who does. And again, you just calling like, hey, I'm coming into town. What's some local hot spots? And then when you do go tour there, it's cool to go visit. Like I remember a tour we just did recently that you planned, Nate. We stopped at a shop, or a couple shops actually.
Yeah. The tab I have open when I'm on Google Earth is Strava. I don't map my rides, but they have a thing called Global Heat Map, which when you're already looking at a specific area, you can see where other cyclists have ridden. And I always kind of try to go for the blues, which are the least ridden. It's actually kind of interesting to see like where that one guy rode to, and then click back over to Google Earth and see what that road looks like and see, oh, maybe I can do that road.
We keep saying adventure cycling, but we really are lucky to have this resource. I was biking in France recently, and some French people actually said like that their favorite place to bike tour is in the U.S. because they're like, you're so lucky to have adventure cycling. And it was just a weird coincidence. They had done the same route I had just done. The maps they're awesome. They have everything you need. They make it really, really easy to plan your trip. So I would really highly recommend that for anyone just getting into it.
Become a member and you get a discount on maps too.
Do any of you have any personal websites or social media accounts or anything that you would want to share? Or if people had questions they wanted to ask, would any of you be willing to answer them?
You can find it. We're all on Instagram, which it's, that's actually another way I think I've plan a lot of my trips. I just sort of see what pictures inspire me and say, oh, hey, so-and-so, that looks like a cool trip. Like, give me the beta.
One Instagram account I really like is based out of the Bay Area, Boys in the Hoods, as in hoods on your handlebars. They plan brevets, which are great things to kind of join in on, but also they post their routes and you can do little bubbles outside of their routes and see, other things to find out on. But sorry, the answer was, I'll answer questions.
DM us.
All right, well, you got to tell them where to find you to DM you.
Lauren Grababrewski on Instagram.
Megan Rose Donuts.
C_baller.
And I am Frank without beans.
All right, and now for the final question, discussion, whatever you want to consider it. Any final advice or final thought you want to leave people with that we haven't discussed, or just something that hasn't been mentioned? Or if you don't have that, tell people why they should give bikepacking a try.
I think it's a great way to get out there and explore the world. Again, we've been talking about planning. I think a little bit misleading to just say, just go explore. I think planning is a key part of it. But I think some of my best memories of the recent years are with the people here and with other friends I have on bikes. And it's a great way to go really far distances in one sense, but at the same time, it's on a human scale because it's completely self-powered. And you have that immediate experience of what you're doing and that connection to it. That's really special. And I think just get out there, whether it's solo and meet people or with some of your friends, and you can have a great time.
So if you like the idea of a road trip, this is what a road trip should be. Like you can stop wherever. You have more time to take in the scenery and or neighborhood that you're in or riding through. You also can go places cars can't go. That's really what it's all about. Like, you can go into mountains, you can go down to sandy beaches and ride along the coasts in Baja, or you can ride over, a peak, and you can see things that usually you can't see in a car, or you can see sometimes backpacking, but it takes way longer when you're backpacking to do so, and you can carry way less stuff. I feel also bikepacking for me was more of just wanting to go on a vacation but not having a plan as much. I didn't have to make any reservations. I have my tent, I have my food, I have my coffee and my beer, so I can just kind of stop when I'm tired and go to sleep and then wake up the next morning and keep riding. It's a much more freeing way of, if you really truly don't want reservations in your vacation, to take a vacation.
Nils kind of hit the nail on the head. It's great for exploring. I love the freedom of it, and do it just because it just makes me really, really happy. It makes me happier than almost anything else when I'm just out there on my bike. You feel really free and empowered, and just like you can do almost anything.
Get out of your cars. Cars are lame. Fuck cars. Everybody ride a bike.
Right, and on that final note, and now that the sprinklers have turned off and all the loud vehicles have left,
let's start recording this podcast.
Now it's time for us to leave too. All right, thank you everybody for coming out here and doing this tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And, and hopefully nobody regrets it.
See.
Nate, Nils, Lauren, and Megan are currently training and preparing for their next big bike trips. They are considering the Baja Divide Cape Loop and the Arizona Black Canyon Trail. And if you want to follow along with any of those adventures, now is a great time to go to our website, gogetoutside.com/podcast. Look for this episode 62, Roundtable on Bikepacking and Touring. And there you're going to find a number of photographs and numerous multitudinous links. Links to everything we mentioned in the show today that had anything to do with a bicycle, and also the individual links to the Instagram accounts of our 4 guests, who you are free to follow on their future trips via their Instagram photographs. And if we missed anything, if you have any other questions, or you just want to drop us a line here at the show and let us know what you thought about this or another episode, well, you can do that a number of ways. Go@butcherbirdstudios.com is the way you can contact us by email. Or you can give us a call, 818-925-0106. And if you would do us a great big favor here at the show, please go to your podcast purveyor of choice and rate, review, subscribe, and share this show with someone. The Go Get Outside podcast is produced, recorded, and edited by me, your host, Jason Milligan. Additional help was provided by Griffin Davis. This episode co-produced by Lauren Grabowski, and brought to you by Butcher Bird Studios. Next time on the show, if you're aching to hear even more about bike touring, then you are in luck. Come back February 1st for Olivia Round. She's going to tell us about how bike touring across the entire United States helped her confront her fears of sexual assault. Come back February 1st, Olivia Round. See you then.